Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on selecting and deploying HOBO data loggers for building performance monitoring. We're going to jump right in here and get things rolling. I can see a lot of people are still joining us, so I will wait one quick second before I transition to the next slide here. All right, so today I am your host. My name is Taryn Picard, and I am the US Sales Manager for our HOBO data loggers. Joining me today is Shannon Ryerson. He is one of our technical sales reps that specializes in building performance monitoring products and applications. And Scott Ellis, who is our product line manager for our indoor building performance and even our outdoor products. So feel free to ask many questions to these guys. These are definitely two experts here with you today. So a little bit of the details here. This webinar will run for approximately 50 minutes. We will leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So really there's only about 30 minutes of presentation that you're going to be sitting through today. We'll try to keep it super entertaining for you. I just want to point out that the webinar is being recorded. So if you have time later on and you want to go back and watch it, if there was something super interesting to you, you can certainly do that. And also there is a section in the corner there for you to type in some questions. So I do want to encourage you to ask questions along the way, and we'll do our best to answer them for you today. A little bit about Onset. That's a picture of our lovely building. We are actually located on Cape Cod, and within that building we are doing manufacturing. And it used to be where we used to sit for sales and marketing, but a lot of us, as you can see, are now working from our lovely home offices remotely, as I'm sure many of you are doing as well. But we do miss that building, and it is still in use where we're making lots and lots of data loggers for you. One thing I would like to highlight is that we are ISO certified. We take a lot of pride and joy in the fact that we are a company that does lean manufacturing. And we stay on top of what we're doing to make sure we are as efficient as we possibly can be when we're making your loggers. Quick overview here, we're just going to run through what is a data logger, common uses. We'll talk about the different indoor measurements, get into some of the details about how you can access your data, why using a data logger is so important, and then we'll get into some applications, and of course we'll try to answer all of your questions. So we're going to kick things off with a poll here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll, and at the same time I'm going to hide my screen so you don't think I'm ignoring you while I look for the poll launching thing. Let's see here, everyone. All right, so are you currently using data loggers? We're going to give you a second here to answer that question. I love to see when we have a variety of different people, but it looks like we have a massive amount of users with us today, and I'm super excited to see most of those users as HOBO data logger users. If you're not, we're hoping to convert you over to the HOBO data logger. And for those of you who are not using loggers at all today, we hope that we can show you some of the benefits as to why you would want to use those loggers. So I'm going to go ahead and post those results so you can see here. And we have a mix of people joining us. Great. And at the same time now, I'm going to switch things over to Shannon. Shannon, if you don't mind running with it, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you very much, Taryn. And again, welcome everyone. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So yeah, let's just get into this. So what is a data logger? A data logger is an electronic instrument that records measurements at a set interval over a period of time. Typically, these data loggers are battery-powered devices equipped with an internal microprocessor, data storage, and one or more sensors. Most data loggers can be deployed in indoor, outdoor, and underwater environments. They are also designed to record data for up to years at a time, unattended. One thing I want to put out that one of the benefits of having these be battery powered is that it does give you the ability to deploy them in areas where AC power may not be easily accessible. So what are the different types of data loggers that we have? There's actually two types. We have interval and state data loggers. An interval data logger reads the input at a selected sample time and stores that reading in its memory. It records at an interval whether or not that data value changes. For example, for temperature, you could have it set for every second or every minute, and it's going to always take that time and date stamp measurement and record that information for you, regardless if that value has changed. A state data logger will check the state of the input every second. The logger then records a change of state within that time or date stamp. There are two states that it records, a 0 or 1. Our state data loggers can also record pulses. When they are recording pulses, what it will do is record the number of pulses within that interval you set for it, and then at the end, it will give you a totalized count of those pulses. And here's an example of two different data files from our interval loggers versus our state loggers. As you can see with the interval logger, it had taken several measurements between 0 up to 2.5 volts, and you can see each point that it took that measurement as it climbs up that graph. With the state data logger, as you can see, it has only two options, 0, which could be for a low state or low logic, or a 1, which could be for a high logic level. So what are some of the typical indoor measurements that we need to take? As you can see from here, there's a few different areas that you can measure within the indoor environment. For environmental measurements, some common applications would be temperature, relative humidity, CO2, air velocity, and volatile organic compounds. In the day and age of COVID, obviously ensuring that you are properly getting adequate air exchange has become much more important, and these devices will help you ensure that you are getting that proper air exchange as set forth by ASHRAE standards. On the power and energy side, we have plug load data loggers, devices to monitor kilowatts, amps, volts, power factor, both AC and DC current. We also have sensors for monitoring differential pressure, gauge pressure, 4 to 20 milliamp signals, pulse signals, DC voltage signals, as well as tilt and acceleration. Some of the benefits to these devices are, for example, with a 4 to 20 milliamp signal, you may have a sensor that outputs that type of signal, where you could connect it to one of our devices, set up the scaling, and then use that sensor, and our data logger would record that information. Lastly, we have time of use data loggers. These consist of light on and off loggers, motor on and off loggers, state loggers, as well as occupancy and light on and off data loggers. So what are some common uses for data loggers? As you can see from the graph here, data loggers are used in a broad range of both indoor, outdoor, underwater, and climate-controlled environments. Essentially, you can deploy a data logger anywhere it is needed, and the convenience of battery power is preferred. So for example, on this chart, you could have a data logger out in the field tracking temperature and relative humidity conditions. You could also be tracking the indoor CO2 of a factory or a building. We also have data loggers that you could deploy in the water for monitoring temperature and light, as well as water level. We also have indoor temperature and relative humidity data loggers for tracking comfort conditions in office spaces and facilities. So why use data loggers? And more specifically, why use HOBO data loggers? First off, they're fast and easy to deploy. We have data loggers that can cover a wide range of measurements as well. Again, that can be from temperature to relative humidity, to plug load, to amperage, voltage. Also, our data loggers are very portable. We like to call that toolbox portability. Some of them are even small enough where you can even stick it right into your pocket. Our data loggers do give you flexible access to the data. And here at Onset, we're very responsive to our product delivery and support. And lastly, we offer highly accurate devices at a cost-effective price point. So now that we learned a little bit about data loggers, how do we use these data loggers? Well, there's actually just a few very simple steps that you need to follow. The first step would be to download and install software or an app on a mobile device or computer. From there, you would connect the data logger, to configure it, and then launch it. After that, you would place it in its desired location and let it record its during that deployment. At the end of the deployment, you need to get the retrieve the data logger, and then reconnect it to either the mobile app or software, and then read out your data to do your plotting and data analysis. So we offer a few different options for accessing your data with our data loggers. We offer USB, Bluetooth, and web-based systems. The USB loggers are designed for short-term trend logging with manual offload. For our Bluetooth data loggers, you just, again, would need to download an app to a mobile device, and you'll be able to access that data through your mobile device. We also offer web-based systems that will push the data from the loggers up to a cloud-based platform for remote access. I would like to point out that our Bluetooth loggers will also give you web-based access, but we'll touch on that a little bit later on in this presentation. So first, let's get into some of our USB loggers and how they operate. When using a USB data logger, you will need to connect the logger to a computer running our HOBOware software with a USB mini-B cable. That is where you'll do your configuration, which is setting the logging interval, when you would like the logger to start, when you want the logger to stop, what to do with when the memory fills. You can either have the data logger stop recording or go into wrap mode where it would start to overwrite the oldest data. Once the logger is done taking its measurements, you would then need to reconnect it to your computer, offload the data to our software, and from there you'll be able to process and analyze that data. Our HOBOware software also does give you the ability to print out presentation quality graphs. And here are some examples of some of the typical data loggers that you would see in indoor monitoring. As you can see, we have data loggers for recording temperature and relative humidity, as well as a plug load data loggers. The plug load data loggers are ideal for monitoring employee workspaces, vending machines, water fountains, anything that would typically get plugged into a 120 volt wall socket. We also have occupancy and light data loggers, which those are very beneficial if you're trying to track meeting rooms where you may have lights on a timer or on a sensor. This data logger will actually tell you when the people were in the room, when they left the room, when the lights came on, and when the lights came off. We also offer thermocouple data loggers, which you could use for recording extremely high or low temperatures. And here's an example of some of our data loggers in use. As you can see on the top, that is, again, one of our thermocouple data loggers. The next one to the right is one of our temperature and relative humidity data loggers. Again, you could use this to verify the accuracy of an environmental chamber or any other device that is where temperature and relative humidity is critical, and you need to ensure that it is within its set specification. We also have a picture of our occupancy and light data logger. As you can see, this is being shown in a meeting room. Again, a good application for this would be if you are trying to make sure that your automated lights are turning on and off when there's occupancies in the room or when the room is unoccupied. And then we also have an example of deploying one of our motor on and off loggers. This logger actually has a few very nice features to it where you can actually calibrate it to show what it looks like when that electric motor is on and what it looks like when that electric motor is on. And that's generated by an AC magnetic field that comes from the electric motor itself. And from there, you'll be able to get time and date stamps for when there was a change in that state, and that would allow you to determine the runtime of that motor. Next, I'd like to talk about some of our Bluetooth data loggers. Our Bluetooth data loggers utilize our app, which is called HOBO Connect. This is a free download that is available in the either Google Play or iTunes App Store. With the HOBO Connect app, you will need to download that to a mobile device, and as long as you're within 100 feet line of sight range, you will be able to connect to the data logger to check its current status, configure the logger, as well as offload the data. And here are a couple screenshots from within the app itself. The first page is showing what it looks like when you are connected to a logger through the app. We also have an image of what the graphical readout looks like in the app, which I would like to bring up that you can print that graph out as well if needed. And you also have the ability to share these data files. We do offer them in common file formats such as XLS, CSV, text, or HOBO. The HOBO files are beneficial if you would prefer to use our HOBOware software, as you can export that data as a HOBO file and open it up in our software for plotting and analysis. And I would like to remind you that HOBO Connect is a free app. And here we have some examples of some of our Bluetooth data loggers. As you can see, we offer them that can monitor temperature and relative humidity, temperature only, temperature and light, and one of our most popular selling data loggers this year is our carbon dioxide temperature and relative humidity data logger. We also recently released some new Bluetooth data loggers, which is part of our MX1100 line, which will allow you to record temperature, relative humidity, light, and it also has an analog channel to connect an external sensor to. For those of you who are familiar with our products, we also released a Bluetooth version of our 4-channel analog data logger. This is the MX1105. This will allow you to connect up to 4 sensors to it, and we offer a wide variety of sensors for this particular device. Again, for past users that have ever used our UX120-006M data logger, you can use those sensors with this device. They still do work with it. These data loggers will give you a wide variety of measurements that you can record. We did release a new suite of self-describing sensors for them, and they do have an IP54 rating, which means that they are splash proof. These data loggers have a lot of memory in them, and they can basically store up to 1.9 million measurements before the memory fills up in it. And they'd operate on just 2 standard AAA batteries, and you should expect about a year's life out of those at a 1 minute or greater logging interval. And with that being said, here's some additional measurements that you can take with our Bluetooth data loggers. Again, some of our loggers do have built-in temperature and relative humidity sensors. From that, you are able to calculate dew point. We also have sensors for light intensity, AC current, AC voltage, DC voltage, air velocity, differential pressure, and 4 to 20 milliamp signals. The DC voltage and 4 to 20 milliamp inputs allow you to actually connect third-party sensors to our devices. If there's a particular sensor that OnSIT may not offer, that will still allow you to use it with this data logger. And basically what you would do is just go in and set up the scaling for it. So whether it's a 4 to 20 milliamp output or a 0 to 2.5 VDC output, you basically just set up the scaling of what the sensor's minimum and maximum reading is based off of that, and the data logger will be able to calculate that measurement depending on the current that it is seeing. You can also assign engineering terms to that measurement that will display on the screen. For example, if you're using a CT, which is a split core current transformer, you could set it up to read amps. If it's a temperature sensor, you could set it to show Fahrenheit or Celsius, depending on which method you would prefer to use. And as I had touched base earlier in the presentation, we did release some self-describing sensors for our new MX1104 and MX1105 data loggers. These sensors do have electronics built into it, so when you plug it into the data logger, it automatically recognizes what type of sensor it is. So for example, if it's a temperature sensor, when you plug it in, the logger knows that it has a temperature sensor plugged in. It helps, it's some time-saving steps for the configuration of the data logger. Another nice feature about our self-describing sensors is we did incorporate a locking mechanism to confirm that the sensor is attached to the device correctly. And as I mentioned before, our Bluetooth loggers you can get web access through them, and that is with the use of our MX gateway. The MX gateway would need to be within 100 feet line of sight from the data loggers, and it can connect up to 100 data loggers to a single gateway. Alarms can be sent on sensor parameters, and analog modules can be added for third-party sensors such as temperature or current, and these can be integrated into several different applications. With the gateway, this does give you real-time measurements to your HOBOlink dashboard. You will have the ability to receive emails or text messages should there be an excursion on any of the alarms that you set. A common application for that is if you're doing, critical monitoring in an environmental chamber or a crack unit or, within an air handler where you need to make sure the temperature resides within a specific range. You can set high and low thresholds, and once the data logger sees that it has exceeded outside of those parameters, you will receive that notification instantaneously. And again, the data loggers do need to be within a 100 feet line of sight from the gateway, and up to 100 data loggers can connect to the gateway. The gateway itself does need an internet connection, whether that's Ethernet or Wi-Fi. One of the nice features about this is if at your facility you offer PoE, which is power over Ethernet, you can power the device that way. If you're using it with a Wi-Fi connection, you will need to plug it into an AC power supply. And our gateway is compatible with all of our MX data loggers. Next, I would like to touch on our web-based monitoring systems. The HOBO RX station provides remote access to site-specific environmental data anytime, anywhere through the internet. And again, all this information is pushed up to our cloud-based platform, HOBOlink. This will give you 24/7 web access to your data through a web browser. And again, since this is cloud-based, you can actually access it from any device with a built-in web browser. So that could be your cell phone, your tablet, your netbook, desktop, laptop, basically any device you use to gain access to the internet. You will be able to log into your HOBOlink account to verify that the RX's 3000's system status remotely. You can also go in and set up and manage your alarms and notifications through the web. So what that means is you don't actually physically have to travel out to the site to program those alarms in the device. You can do that from the comfort of your own home. You can also set up scheduled automated data deliveries. Now, this becomes very beneficial if you need to send out weekly reports. You can set it up where this data is delivered to a specific email address or multiple email addresses, or you can even have that data pushed to an FTP site. There's 3 forms of telemetry that we offer for our RX units, and that would be cellular, Ethernet, or Wi-Fi. With our web-based systems, we did release a suite of wireless HOBOnet sensors. These sensors utilize a mesh technology, and they have a transmission range of about 1,500 feet line of sight between sensor to the device. The HOBOnet sensors are scalable, and you can connect up to 50 wireless sensors to one RX unit. Within these wireless sensors, again, within the HOBOlink platform, you will have remote access to the data in its current conditions, and also the ability to set up customizable dashboards for easy data analysis. And again, with HOBOlink, you do have the ability to set remote alarms and notifications, and you can be notified when those conditions exceed those user set thresholds. Here's an example of a HOBOlink dashboard where we have set up a few different widgets with some, temperature, relative humidity, solar radiation, different parameters in here. When this becomes beneficial is if there was, some specific data loggers that you had deployed where you want to look at all the data from them in one localized area. Within our systems, you have the ability to choose specific channels from specific data loggers or sensors and have those readings display on one graph. Again, this may help if there's any specific areas that you need to critically monitor or watch. This gives you an easy access view to see all of those in one centralized location. Another nice feature about our HOBOlink cloud-based platform is we do have a map view, which actually utilizes Google Maps. From here, you can actually see the path that each of the wireless sensors for our RX unit, the path that they're taking to get back to the main hub. As we had mentioned earlier, our HOBOnet sensors do form a mesh network. Now, what that means is if one of the sensors is either out of sight or out of range from the RX3000, it can actually pass its signal through other sensors in line, making up to 5 hops to get that data back to the RX. One of the nice features too about this map view is you can see what the current conditions are on each of these sensors. So again, it will give you a temperature reading, relative humidity reading, as well as a dew point reading. Which brings up one other thing I'd like to mention. With our temperature and relative humidity data loggers, our app and our software will actually calculate dew point based off of those 2 readings. So really, when you buy one of our data loggers, you're actually getting 3 different measurements out of that 2-channel data logger. So from there, we'd actually like to open up another poll question.
All right, well, I've just launched the poll. So what is your primary application for data loggers? This is always a great question to ask because it definitely helps us understand who's joining us today, and hopefully it will help explain some of the questions and answers we'll be going over shortly. And as your answers are rolling in, it looks like there's a pretty good split here between our indoor air quality and HVAC group, our energy project group, and then it kind of dwindles off. I will close out the poll here in just a second and share those results. All right, so sharing the results with you, as I said, most of our attendees today are joining us and monitoring in the indoor air quality and HVAC area or energy projects. Thank you so much for sharing your feedback, everyone.
All right, and from here, I would like to pass this off to Scott now for him to answer some of our more specific application questions.
There it is.
There we go.
All right, just takes me a minute here. Sorry, guys. So this is why we don't do demos, right? So I'll have to stop the conversation I'm having with Dan and Benjamin behind the scenes here. There's a lot of good questions that are coming in, so please keep them coming. And we kind of changed up the presentation a little bit. There were so many questions that came in prior to this that we figured, let's kind of get rid of the canned applications and really dive into what you guys are asking. And one of the first questions that we wanted to touch on was that Shannon just talked about 2 different types of wireless systems, and what are the differences, and what should I be looking at? So the first was the Bluetooth loggers that Shannon talked about, and that's more or less of a star network. The gateway needs to be centrally located typically, and all of those sensors are going to send their information back to that gateway. There are cases where, yes, you can absolutely use 2 gateways. Our cloud will actually figure it out, so there's no duplicate data coming up. At the onset building, for example, I ended up having to use 2 gateways just because we happen to have our server farm right in the middle of the building, and that actually blocks a lot of the Bluetooth traffic getting back to one particular gateway. The other part of this was the HOBOnet sensors, which uses a meshing network. Now, the difference here, it does use the 900 megahertz bandwidth, so it can actually transmit better through walls and things like vegetation. The product line was actually originally designed for agriculture, But again, the benefit of this here is that it can hop and the sensors can talk to each other. They can use each other as repeaters and then finally come back to one particular location where that data then gets sent up to HOBOlink. And I hope to be looking at that here down the road too. I would, before I hit the next one, this is being recorded, so we will send this out again. And then there's 5 handouts that we've put out here for you. So if you're looking for some advanced information about how to monitor buildings, be sure to download those PDFs. They're also available on our website too. But grab those while you're here. Any tips for monitoring conditions in crawl spaces or attics? How many loggers should I be using and where should I place them? What about for data logger placement in residential homes? What are the best results? And you know, it really depends upon the space that you're trying to accomplish. I acquired this image here on the right to kind of show you the different things that you can monitor in a typical house. Personally, I'm doing a bunch of monitoring here because of the way that my attic is set up. I actually have we added on and added a door. So basically I have a data logger in each section and then as well as in the crawl spaces. But when you're talking about a wide open space, the loggers will typically cover about 2,500 square feet. Some of the things you need to take into consideration too when you're looking at a space, you know, in this particular image here, you can see it's pretty wide open except for the cubicles. You can see all of the vents in there. You know, at a minimum, you'd probably at least want to use 1 data logger in here. But, you know, if you're getting specific complaints, somebody's too hot or too cold. We've had an instance at our own building where you know, a particular employee had the vent blowing directly on her, and she was also against a cement wall, which you know, has a lot of cold that comes through it, you know, during the winter. So we were actually able to see like a 3 to 4 degree difference from the thermostat to where her feet were. And just one more different sort of office space. As you can see, this is divided up a little differently. So again, with these half walls, or you know, if there were doors or meeting rooms and stuff like that, you know, you would want to potentially put a logger in each space. Other things, outside conditions. Dan, I think you were asking about, you know, how do we get outdoor and indoor measurements. So we do have a full line of outdoor products that I'll touch on here in a little bit. But you do have the ability to get those because it is critical to understand what's going on outside and how that affects the indoor environments as well. Wow, you guys are blowing me up with questions. This is great. Keep them coming. How best to set up indoor air quality information and data dumping. This particular person wants to send this to a customer and let them do it so they don't need to be on site. And what I would do here is set up the data logger beforehand, set up the logging interval and all of the settings on the channels, and then either use a date and time start or a push button start. And you know, from there, once the person gets it, they can put it into their environment. And then in terms of the data retrieval, if you're using the USB loggers, we have something that's called a data shuttle. So they could offload that and send that shuttle back if you're doing a long-term study. Obviously, if you're doing a short-term study, just sending the data logger back while it's still running, that's always an option. And then with the Bluetooth loggers, have them download HOBO Connect. I'll show you guys HOBO Connect in a little bit here, just so you can get a look and feel of what that looks like. But then they can, you know, email you or text you the data as well. So a bunch of different options there. This gets into your question, Dan. Interested in looking at doing monitoring inside and outside the building, looking at wind, rain, temperature. Also, do you have instruments that'll do big concrete dams? I did see that we have some environmental questions coming in, even though we're mainly focusing on the building automation. But we do have a wide variety of sensors and data loggers, even right down to full-blown weather stations, water quality sensors, water level sensors, or the product on the left, just a simple temperature and humidity sensor that's Bluetooth enabled. So, definitely check out the website, or reach out to Shannon. Shannon's going to be the guy who you're going to want to talk to with specific questions as well. Wow. Okay, there's a lot coming in. Best practices for connecting current sensors to air compressors and HVAC systems. How do we apply it to industrial machinery? Looking at runtime, uptime, downtime of motors. Typically, folks are going to use either the UX120 or the MX1105 with a current transformer or a CT. Those are split core, so they open up and then you clamp it around the wire. And then for the runtime, here's an example of looking at an HVAC. You can monitor amperage to get an approximation of, one, what is it pulling for amp draw, but two, how often is it running? And then you can also look at your intake and outtake temperatures and your temperature near the thermostat. And then I think I swiped this image from Shannon earlier of just looking at a motor housing. There was a question earlier, if you can't get to the motor housing, there actually is an input on the bottom of this where you can hook up what's called a current switch. It looks very similar to a CT, and that would clamp around one of the main power wires going to that particular motor. Yeah, so we do have for temperature and humidity, we do have some external sensors. The one product that I would take a look at is the MX1104. It has built-in temperature and humidity, and then it has external inputs, so you could plug a CT into it as well. So I would definitely take a look at that particular one here. What's the most affordable solution for long-term hourly trending of power data, and which is the best to get an email alert for demand KW and KVA? And this will get into some of the questions when it comes to power, but we do offer what's called the watt node kilowatt hour transducer, and that has a pulse output. Our lowest cost bundle is with the USB solution and the UX90. For those of you who might be getting into sub-metering, looking at full buildings, maybe you're trying to get into billing, the EG4100 series is a meter logger and web server. And that will automatically get your data. Well, actually, you actually type the URL and you're able to stream the data right out of this. With this, there's a lot of different channels and a lot of different settings that you can set up. But one of the things you can do is if you reach a particular demand level over a period of time, so let's say your typical work day, you can then receive alerts with that. So I would definitely check out the EG4100 series. It's available in 15 or 30 channels, and you can mix and match whether that's single phase or 3-phase. We have somebody who's looking at water consumption of their schools. What can you do? We carry this specific water meter. It's typically used with 3/4 inch pipes. You can connect it up to either our USB or our remote or wireless options to get your data. Again, one of the nice things about having a generic pulse input is that, let's say you have a BTU meter, or you have an ultrasonic meter, or you may already have a water meter that already has a pulse output on it. You'd then be able to hook up any of our data loggers to that. And then finally, we had a lot of questions on the analog input, and this is one example of somebody who needed to do differential pressure. And I believe there was somebody early on here who was looking for a hooking it up to a light meter, a light sensor. So the analog input is 16-bit resolution, which we've seen it gives pretty good resolution for most of those sensors that just give a 0 to 100 millivolt output. You'll see some really decent step changes, but what I would do is check out the specs there on our website. But for this particular application, the Verus differential pressure transducer, it's actually available in all these different ranges, and you just change the dip switches on the sensor itself to adjust smaller or larger ranges. And it is compatible with these types of loggers. Some of our USB and our Bluetooth loggers, you will need to provide excitation power for that sensor. So we do provide a you can get an AC power adapter. When you start to get into the RX 3000, that actually does have the ability to provide excitation power on that. And then again, you've got multiple ports on here, so you can just plug in an appropriate temperature sensor with that as well. Yeah. So you've got older loggers, and I see there's a number of you guys who have older loggers. So why should you upgrade? You know the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But hopefully what you've seen is that we have some really cool new toys. You know, there's more convenient ways to get your data. And I will admit, one of the problems with our loggers is that the darn things just run forever. I had a customer back in my days in sales who used to come to me on a regular basis, and he actually had the old film canister. And, you know, this goes back to 1990 or something like that when those first came out. But the new product ranges, as we've been coming out with them, we've been giving them better accuracy, better resolution, more memory, and then of course just the simple convenience of being able to get the data remotely, you know, so you don't have to go into buildings. Before I want to show you a couple screenshots here and show you guys HOBO Connect real quick. So we've had a lot of questions coming in about control systems. So our products do not naturally feed back into control systems. So we do have for HOBOlink an API. The data does need to go through HOBOlink, and then it could be pulled back into a control system, but there is a bit of a lag there. So I see Craig, you had that question, and a couple other folks here too had those questions. So I'm going to switch gears here real quick, because we also know that a lot of times folks have wanted to see the software. And I guess I am looking for feedback on this. Taryn, Shannon, can you guys see HOBO Connect?
Yes, it's scanning for onset, gateway, and loggers.
Okay, cool. So I'm giving folks kind of you're getting a sneak peek here. We're going to be coming out with a new version of HOBO Connect that's actually going to be for Windows. So Windows 10 specifically, it's going to be out in a couple months. But I wanted to show you kind of how the mobile app would work, even though this is on Windows. There'll be a cool new dashboarding feature in there. But let me go back to the devices here. And basically it's going to scan for any of the loggers that are within range. Let me do this. Oh, there we go. And I've actually had the app running in the background for a little bit, so it took a minute for the Bluetooth things to come within range. But you know, basically you can see these are loggers that I have around the house and currently doing recording. I'll just click on this green one here, which I pushed a button to have it. We'll go ahead and connect to it. And in terms of setting up your data logger, it's pretty straightforward. You can give it a name, or you can use the default serial number. You can change your logging interval. When you do change the logging interval, it's then going to show you potentially how long it will run for. That's based upon the memory and not how much battery that you actually have on there. As I was talking about before, you have different ways to start your logger, whether it's right now. I typically recommend on the next logging interval or on a particular date and time. And the reason for that is if you're using with multiple multiple loggers and you need to combine all that information, it's good to have everything synced up at the at the same logging interval. But you can have the logger stop at a particular time. You can have it wrap around when full. You can get down into the settings. So if you want to set a particular high and low value, you can come in here and change this. You can also just type in what you want it to be, and we'll hit save. And then from there, you just go ahead and hit start. And this is going to be then the information sent up to HOBOlink. And at this point, this is configured to work with the gateways that I have here at the house. Just to give you an example of what a graph might look like, just takes a second to disconnect here. And I did put this into what's called dark mode. So there is also a, hang on, there we go. Did I mention we're still in development on this? So it's exciting to be able to see this on the, there we go. So, this is what it looks like in dark mode. We'll just go over and I'll put this into light mode, and we can take a look at it that way as well. So, so here's an idea. You can, again, as Shannon was saying, you can share your data. And for those of you who are familiar with HOBOware, HOBOconnect isn't going to have all of the graphing features that HOBOware does. One of the things that you will do is basically save your data file. It will get saved directly to a directory. And as you can see, this is coming up with the HOBOware icon. So if you do have HOBOware on your computer, you will be able to just open that up in the HOBOware program if you want to do some of the additional analysis there. And then finally, one of the things, in terms of, Shannon touched on this in terms of the dashboards. Here's a particular dashboard where I've got loggers that are coming in here around the house. The difference between using HOBOconnect is that dashboard is only going to be running while HOBOconnect is running. Whereas if you have your data going into HOBOlink, and you might have this coming from a station, you may have it coming from a Bluetooth logger. This is where you can give somebody basically up to a month view to go through and look and see what some of the trending data is. And you can also share this information also. So this particular URL only gives folks a view only, so they don't need to log into the HOBOlink system to see anything. How do I personally apply all of this information at home? Well, the first thing I will say is if you do this, make sure the blinking lights aren't blinking at you on the loggers all the time, because family members will get angry. And also, if you set up alarms, make sure your loggers don't beep, because when they start going off at 3 o'clock in the morning, people don't like that. For me personally, really, I'm looking at my house. We did an addition about a year and a half ago. The original part of the house was built back in the 80s. You can certainly see that one part of the house comes up the temperature a lot quicker than the others. I also have a reminder that with this in-school learning, that sometimes my daughter will jack up the temperature and all of a sudden it's 75 degrees upstairs. And I can get an alert when that happens. So there's some other things, just looking at mold in the basement, concerned about mold in the attic space and crawl spaces as well. So that's, certainly some things that, that we like to take a look at here. There's been questions about sensor drift, and calibration and things like certification and NIST and all that sort of stuff. So we do, all of our sensors do have a spec. As most of you pointed out, relative humidity does have a tendency to drift over time. Ours is typically, again, it really depends upon the environment. In a normal building office setting where you're seeing anywhere between 25 to 65% humidity, it's usually under 1% a year. We do have a NIST certification program, so if you want to send something back in, you can certainly do that to get it recertified. On both on the pulse and the 4 to 20 milliamps or the 0 to 5 volts, as we've said before, we can take the raw data coming in and you can then make that meaningful. So you can scale your data. So Benjamin, to your point, if 1 pulse equals 1/10 of a gallon on the flow meter, you can adjust that within the software when you initially set that up. And then that also translates to the LCD. So when you walk up to it, you can see what's going on in time there. And then, if you're using one of the gateways or the information going up to the cloud, that is certainly possible to do that as well. Taryn, I don't know if there's anything you want to hit me up specifically, because there was just a ton of stuff that came in.
Absolutely, and I will apologize. I'm a bit on mute because I am frantically typing, so I am trying to get back to a lot of these fabulous questions. But just a quick plug: if we didn't get to your question and you have a burning desire to get an answer right away, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have a team of application experts who can certainly help you. We also have a technical support team who can help you. So if you already have your loggers, reach out to tech support. If you're trying to figure out what you need for your project, reach out to our sales team and our application team. We can help you. We'll also scan through all of your questions over the next few days and try to get people to reach out to you. But that process can take some time. So I just encourage you to reach out to us if we don't answer your question today. So Scott, lots and lots and lots of great questions about, this is one of your favorites. Can our loggers integrate with a building automation system and do controls?
When the hosts aren't listening. Yeah, no, sorry,
No,
I did touch on that.
You can, but I've actually typed out this answer to about 50 people, so it looks like a lot of people have missed it, and then I'm typing it out to everyone.
Yeah, totally fine. No, I'm just messing with you.
I'm not listening because I'm typing and answering to everybody's questions.
Yeah, so our systems do not tie directly into control systems. There is a HOBOlink API, so there's potentially the possibility to get the data from HOBOlink back into a control system, but there's definitely a little bit of a lag there. So, probably not the best solution for getting into controls. And I think really where you see folks use our products is when they maybe have trouble spots within that control system. And sometimes it's a pain to just wire a particular new sensor to a new spot. So you can just go out and throw out a data logger there for a week, a month, whatever, and start to understand what that area is kind of doing. But specifically tying into automation systems, we can't do that directly.
Awesome. And then I've gotten several questions on NIST, well, I guess on calibration specifically. So if you want to talk a little bit about, I guess NIST would be really the only calibration service we offer, but lots of questions on, do we offer calibration services?
Yeah, and really what we offer is for temperature and humidity. We have worked with third-party labs that they can, look at some of the other parameters out there. There are some scaling capabilities on some of our sensors. So if you needed to put in an offset specifically, I know a lot of people do for soil moisture. But yeah, and like I said before, the sensors really don't drift all that much. But again, if you're working, let's say in a laboratory environment that requires a NIST certification or something along those lines, that's something that we definitely offer.
Great. And I'm going to ask you Marco's question because Marco, I have the same question. Are we going to come out with a Bluetooth version of the motor on-off UX9004 data logger?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's kind of the $1 billion lottery ticket that we missed out on. Yeah, no, there's certainly been talk about it. I do know that we have it on our roadmap. There's no specific time frame on it at this particular point.
Great. And I think we've got plenty of additional questions here, but it looks like at this point we probably are best to try to circle back with a lot of our friends here today, because a lot of them are getting pretty specific and into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, so what I'll say is just, Robert, you had something on heat islands. Yes, I think our HOBOnet system will work for you, but we will certainly follow up with you afterwards. There was one other one. Jonathan, you have a 50-room mansion. We should definitely have Shannon reach out to you and talk to you about that. And then God bless you, Kimberly. You've got some of our original boxcar hobos going way far back in a historic museum in 50 different rooms. We'd absolutely love to talk to you. That's exactly what our team does, whether it's Shannon or whether you're talking to Sean, Andrew, or Matt, or Eileen. Any of those folks will be able to walk you through that. So definitely, Kimberly, we'll reach out to you afterwards and help you look at some of them, and hopefully taking a look at what these new systems will do for you today, as opposed to the really old boxcar stuff. Hopefully you'll find a good solution in this. So
yeah, and I just one more quick plug here. If we didn't cover any of the measurements you were looking for, I know some people had asked about particulate counters and some other different types of measurements that we don't advertise. We can connect up to a lot of third-party different sensors. So if you can find the sensor that meets your needs, depending upon the output of that sensor, it may be something we can still work with. So, never hesitate to reach out to us with maybe the specifications of the sensor you'd like to use, and we'd be happy to work with you to take a look at what those output specs are and let you know if we're compatible with it.
Yeah, Chris, we'll reach out to you, man. That's quite the question.
There's a lot, guys. I must say, of all the webinars we've done, you guys have been a really great group of participants. I'm really impressed with all of the questions coming across. I will say they are super, super specific, so I'm not sure even a 5-hour webinar would answer all of these, but we're happy to circle back with a lot of you. I love to see the interaction and the engagement.
And actually, I do like this one. Will the data logger eat its tail in terms of the memory? I've never heard it put that way, but yeah, we do have wrap capabilities with some of our data loggers, so the memory will overwrite the oldest if you put it into that particular mode. So shall we wrap it up? Is that I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly shall. Again, we will sync back up with everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will send out a recording. I know we said that several times, but it was still a question that came up several times, so I will repeat it. Thank you guys for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you for using HOBO data loggers. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.